The experiment that proved loneliness is physically destroying you. Picture the last time you felt lonely. Maybe it wasn't when you were alone. Maybe it was at a party, surrounded by people, noise, laughter, drinks in, everyone's hands, and you were standing there perfectly present, completely unreachable. That feeling has a name, but the name is wrong. We call it loneliness, and we treat it like an emotion. Something that comes and goes. Something soft. Something you push through. But in the last 30 years, scientists have discovered that what we call loneliness is not an emotion at all. It is a biological alarm system. And if it stays on long enough, it will start dismantling your body from the inside. The research is not fringe. It is not self-help. It comes out of some of the most rigorous institutions in the world, and the findings are consistent enough that the medical community is now treating chronic loneliness as a public health crisis on the same level as obesity. One meta-analysis covering 3.4 million people found that prolonged loneliness increases your risk of early death by 26%. Another found it does more damage to your cardiovascular system than smoking 15 cigarettes a day. You read that correctly. 15 cigarettes every single day. And the strangest part of all of this is that scientists didn't set out to study loneliness. They stumbled into it while trying to answer a completely different question. And what they found inside the bodies of lonely people changed. Everything we thought we knew about the relationship between the mind and the body. To understand what they found, you have to go back to the beginning. Not 30 years ago, much further than that. For almost all of human history, being alone was not a feeling. It was a condition, and the condition was fatal. Your ancestors did not survive as individuals. They survived as groups, a human. Being alone on the African savanna 200,000 years ago was not independent. It was injured or sick or cast out, and it was almost certainly going to die. Predators targeted the separated animal, always, across every species, across every ecosystem. Isolation was the precondition for being eaten. Your body knew this. And so your body evolved a system to make sure you never stayed isolated for long. A system so powerful that it would override almost everything else. That system is what we call loneliness. Social pain exists for the same reason physical pain exists. It is your body detecting a threat and demanding you do something about it. When you touch something hot, pain fires instantly, and you pull your hand away. The pain is not the problem. The pain is the warning. The burn is the problem. Loneliness works the same way. The feeling is not the damage. The feeling is the signal. It is your nervous system reading the environment, determining that you are dangerously isolated and firing an alarm that is designed to be uncomfortable enough to change your behavior. For 200,000 years, it worked. You felt the pain of separation. You moved back toward the group. The alarm turned off, and you survived. But then something went wrong. In the mid-1980s, a psychologist named John Cacioppo at the University of Chicago started asking a question that almost nobody in his field was taking seriously. What is loneliness actually doing to the body? Not to the mood, not to mental health in the abstract, to the physical body. The cells, the blood, the organs. He spent the next 30 years finding out. What Cacioppo and his colleagues discovered was not subtle. They took blood samples from people who scored high on loneliness measures and compared them to people who did not. They scanned their brains. They measured their hormone levels. They tracked their health outcomes across years and decades. And what they found inside the bodies of lonely people looked like the body under siege. First, cortisol, the primary stress hormone in people experiencing chronic loneliness. Cortisol levels were significantly and consistently elevated, not slightly, significantly. The kind of elevation you see in someone who is physically afraid on a regular basis. Because biologically, that is exactly what is happening. Your body cannot distinguish between being separated from your group in a dangerous environment and sitting alone in a modern apartment. The threat detection system does not know about cities or smartphones or the fact that a tiger is not waiting outside your door. It only knows the alarm is on. And so it keeps producing cortisol day after day, month after month. Here is the problem with that. Cortisol is designed for emergencies. A short burst gets you out of danger. It sharpens your focus, floods your muscles with glucose, prepares your body to fight or run. But cortisol running continuously at low levels over months and years is catastrophic. It suppresses your immune system. It disrupts the architecture of your sleep. It accelerates inflammation throughout your entire body. And inflammation, as medicine has spent the last 2 decades discovering, is the underlying mechanism of almost every major chronic disease. Heart disease, diabetes, early cognitive decline. Cacioppo's team found that lonely people had measurably higher levels of inflammatory markers in their blood than socially connected people of the same age, same diet, same fitness level. The loneliness itself was the variable. The inflammation was the result. But it goes deeper than that. In 2007, researchers studying telomeres, the protective caps on the ends of your chromosomes that function like the plastic tips on shoelaces, found that chronic loneliness was associated with significantly shorter telomere length. Telomeres shorten naturally as you age. That shortening is one of the primary mechanisms of biological aging itself. When they get short enough, cells stop dividing properly. Tissue repair breaks down, the body begins to fail. Lonely people's telomeres were shorter, their cells were aging faster, not metaphorically, measurably, biologically faster. And then Cacioppo found something that may be the strangest piece of all of this. He looked at the brains of lonely people during a specific task. He showed them images of human faces, some smiling, some neutral, some threatening, and he watched what happened in the brain's threat detection circuits. In socially connected people, the threatening faces activated the threat response. Expected, normal. In lonely people, all the faces did. Every face. Smiling, neutral, threatening, it didn't matter. The brain, primed to detect social danger, was finding it everywhere. It had become hypersensitive to threat. It was scanning every human interaction for evidence of rejection, exclusion, or harm. And here is where the trap closes. Because a brain in that state is not easy to be around. People who are chronically lonely often become more guarded, more defensive, more prone to misreading neutral interactions as hostile. The very alarm system that is supposed to drive you back toward connection starts making connection harder. The loneliness feeds itself. Cacioppo called it a self-reinforcing loop. The more isolated you feel, the more threat your brain detects in social situations. The more you withdraw, the more isolated you become. And almost nobody catches it happening. Because from the outside, it looks like personality. It looks like preference. It looks like choice. Now, here's the part that most people find hardest to accept. Loneliness is not about being alone. This is the finding that keeps getting buried under the smoking statistics and the mortality headlines. Cacioppo was explicit about this throughout his career. Loneliness is a perception. It is the gap between the social connection you have and the social connection you need. And that gap can exist in a marriage, in a family, in an office of 200 people. In a city of millions, you can live alone in a cabin in the mountains and not be lonely. You can sit in a crowded room and be, by every biological measure, completely alone. This is why the modern loneliness epidemic is so hard to solve with the tools we keep reaching for. Social media gives you presence without contact. It gives you an audience without intimacy. You can track hundreds of connections at a surface level and still find the thing. Your nervous system is actually measuring genuine closeness, mutual vulnerability, the feeling of being truly known, completely absent. The alarm stays on, and we have never, in the entire history of our species, had more of this particular kind of company. We live in the most connected moment in human history. The loneliness data suggests we are also the loneliest. A 2023 report from the U.S. Surgeon General declared loneliness a full public health epidemic. Studies in the UK found that 1 in 4 adults reported feeling lonely, often or always. The numbers are worse for young adults, the generation that grew up the most connected, than for any other age group. Something is badly misfiring. Your ancestors' loneliness alarm evolved for a world where isolation was rare, temporary, and solvable. Move back toward the group, the alarm turns off, the body resets. But modern life has created conditions the alarm was never built for. Isolation, that is chronic, ambient, and invisible. You are not separated from your tribe by distance or by danger. You are sitting next to people you don't really know, looking at photographs of people you have never met, in a city of strangers, with a nervous system still running a social survival program designed for a group of 150. The alarm is on. It does not know how to turn off.
And every month it stays on. The inflammation builds, the cortisol accumulates, the telomeres shorten, and the brain grows a little more convinced that the world is a threatening place, full of people who cannot be trusted. Cacioppo spent the last decade of his life not just documenting the problem, but trying to solve it. He died in 2018. In his final years, he was studying what actually moved the needle, what reduced the biological markers of loneliness in people who had been living inside it for years. The answer was not more social contact. It was meaningful social contact, quality over quantity specifically. One conversation where you felt genuinely seen did more measurable good than 20 surface interactions. The nervous system was not counting connections, it was evaluating depth, which means the solution is not simpler than the problem. It might be harder, because depth requires vulnerability, and vulnerability is exactly what a chronically lonely, threat-sensitized brain is least willing to allow. We are the only animal that evolved specifically and completely to need each other. Every other social species, wolves, dolphins, elephants, lives in the kind of close, continuous, physical proximity their nervous systems were built for. We invented a world that makes that almost impossible. And then we wondered why something feels wrong. The experiment did not end in Cacioppo's lab. It is still running. You are probably in it right now. The question is not whether the alarm is on. The question is how long you are going to let it keep going.